Okay, so while it's been a pretty quiet summer in the NFL landscape, the sports media world went into a frenzy yesterday after ESPN made a huge announcement laying off 20 on-air talent that included the likes of Jeff Van Gundy, Keyshawn Johnson, Susie Colbert, Steve Young, Max Kellerman, and probably the most shocking one of all is Jalen Rose, who's been with them for almost 20 years. These massive layoffs come after ESPN's parent company Disney announced they had just lost billions of dollars in the last couple years and had to make some changes with some cost-cutting measures. So there have been some rumblings that this axe was going to fall on some guys like Keyshawn and Max for quite some time, but the Jalen Rose one kind of fooled me. With ESPN paying Pat McAfee $85 million for the next 5 years, it didn't necessarily mean they weren't going to spend any money, but rather they were going to cut anyone who was redundant or carried huge contracts like Max, Keyshawn, and Jeff Van Gundy. One thing to note, Keyshawn was a year into a huge $18 million deal, and the company just plans to write that salary off. Anyways, the main thing to note here is that they actually kept the biggest tool in sports media in Kendrick Perkins. Honestly, how many of you were watching the Pat McAfee Show yesterday and were hoping Pat was going to give him his pink slip on the air? Unfortunately, the brasses up top labeled this buffoon a rising star in the organization along with JJ Redick, so I think we're just going to have to put up with him and his takes for a little longer. But it appears that ESPN is just looking to hold on to the main guys who are the face of the company like SVP and Stephen A. Smith, along with former newly retired players who are on cheap contracts, which kinda does make sense. A lot of these guys could just make a name for themselves at ESPN and then jump ship and either go independent or to a competitor if ESPN doesn't meet their higher salary demands. Anyways, with this huge shakeup in the industry, there are a ton of unanswered questions. Like for starters, is Shady McCoy going to be Skip's new partner? That's what the rumor was, as there were multiple reports Undisputed had trouble finding a co-host as the one wanted to work with Skip, which I kind of found a little BS. Anyone who works with Skip is just going to have a boost in their career and a lot of clicks and media coverage. Skip is such a hated individual that honestly, anyone who sits across from him, he's going to make them look better no matter what because Skip's takes are just so controversial. I'm not saying Shannon only got big because of Skip. Shannon was a likable character and extremely funny at times with his viral one-liners or facial expressions, but he did benefit a lot sitting across from Bayless and debating him. That said, I wonder if there might be a new frontrunner after all these layoffs. I'm not talking about Max because there has been no sports-based shows in the last 8 years that had an all-white cast. Also, I just don't think the two would have worked well together. They have been on First Take together in the past, but to co-host a show, just the two of them, I just don't see it. The one I'm actually wondering about is Jalen Rose, and he and Skip have deep history. Jalen was the one who called out Skip on First Take with the 1.3 points Pistol Pete comment.
That's
What
just
were
a
you,
position.
Jalen? What were you?
What were you? Did you
What
average,
were you?
Did you average 1.4 points as a senior in high school?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so all of that Pistol Pete stuff, Pistol Pete Jr.
Okay, well, we'll address that later. We're going to.
One thing I do know about Skip Bayless is that he's willing to work with anyone. Doesn't matter if he doesn't like the person sitting across from him. If he thinks it's good for the show, I think he'd be on board. That's just the vibe I get from him, but maybe I'm wrong though. One interesting thing with Skip was that yesterday, during all the layoffs, he tweeted a non-sports tweet that read, "Still chuckling over a clown calling me an idiot." Yo, Skip doesn't really ever make these types of tweets that aren't sports related, so this caught some eyes. Some people thought he was trolling the ESPN guys getting canned, particularly Jalen Rose, and some thought it was directed at Charles Barkley. The next important piece of news in the sports media landscape is where Shannon Sharpe will land. It was rumored that he may take over Pat McAfee's spot at FanDuel because we all know that these sports betting companies pay huge sums of money for talent. And now that they have an extra $30 million lying around after Pat's departure, Shannon could very well slide right in there. That's huge money if they could get a guy like Shannon who has a similar level of cachet and clout like Pat. The other rumor is that Shannon Sharpe will join ESPN and may take over the Monday Night Football duties that was vacated by Steve Young. This would allow him to make occasional appearances on First Take, which would be huge for ESPN and their ratings. Stephen A. has already given the green light for Shannon to join the show, so that might be in the cards for Shannon. Anyways, let me know what you guys think. Where do you think Shannon will land, and who will be Skip's new co-host?